This is the examination of the hidden human condition.
You're listening to the Hidden Killers Podcast.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Bruschi.
We are talking with former federal prosecutor and attorney Eric Faddis about Rex Heuermann today. We've obviously learned a lot about him in the last 2 weeks, including his alleged affinity for sex workers. We're hearing more and more stories from surviving sex workers who I'm guessing look back going, wow, that could have been me. But a lot of people have had encounters allegedly with Heuermann. Do you think we're going to continue to see that sort of trend continue? And I also wonder if there were a lot of red flags that these individuals had, but they simply couldn't speak out about because, number one, the industry that they're in not being exactly legal, and then number two, people just not taking someone seriously simply because of what they are involved in.
Yeah, as you said, we've learned a lot about this, and at least according to the allegations, and things are still developing, it appears that this is Rex Heuermann's modus operandi.
Yep.
He targets the most vulnerable folks that he can, in this case, alleged sex workers, in large part because there is a culture of silence around that scene. Like you said, it's illegal in most states, and these folks don't often go to the police and say, hey, I was about to engage in sex work when an individual got violent with me. Historically, these folks are subject to violence, degradation, and homicide, and as well as sexual assault and everything else. And it seems fitting that Rex Heuermann allegedly selected these people as his victims because he thought it would be less likely that he would be caught.
When you really look at it, and it's something that I think a lot of us don't look at very closely, this is an area that it really is a playground for abusers and horrible people taking advantage of these women. It's not always just somebody that's paying someone for sex and then they go on their way and that's the end of the day. It really seems to be an outlet for this type of character. It really makes me wonder if there were more things in place or more protections in place, or even, I don't even know if I want to say it being legal or not, but in theory, if it were, would this sort of individual be allowed to flourish as long as he did?
A good question, because like I said, a lot of these folks don't want to come forward and report when they see something problematic in a John who's trying to pick them up, because they themselves, the sex worker, doesn't want to get caught. Perhaps if there were more resources in place, more safe harbor laws, maybe something that would insulate these sex workers from criminal consequences if they came forward with helpful tips to the police to try and stop these predators. I just wonder if having something like that in place could potentially limit or prevent this sort of horrible repeat tragedy that's being alleged against Rex Heuermann, the Long Island serial killer.
What can be done? Like, speaking from your own expertise, is there any sort of protections? Let's say a sex worker came up to you and said, look, this was really weird, this encounter that I had. I think someone should know about it, or I want to press charges because I was abused or violated in some way, shape, or form. Can that be done? Is that ever done? And how would a court look at that, considering the nature of the relationship between the abuser and the person doing the abuse?
Yeah, I wonder if it's almost the sex worker industry analogous to the drug scene. Like here in Colorado, for example, people, when they're using drugs, they often don't want to call the cops if something is going wrong because they don't want to get in trouble. But here we have a law that essentially says if someone is overdosing through the use of drugs, even if you're there doing it with them, you can call police to try and help them, and you're not going to get charged with a crime. I'm just wondering if having some kind of protection in place for the sex worker industry under similar circumstances when they believe that a crime has happened or is likely to happen. I wonder if having that in place would encourage more of these folks to speak out, more of these red flags to become apparent to law enforcement, and investigations to begin sooner before these tragedies keep recurring.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
with Tony Bruschi.